Thank you so much for tuning back into another segment here on Gems Podcast. With me is a double whammy, y'all. So I have Dr. Bruce Chalmer and Judy Alexander. They are a married couple. And let me tell you a little bit more about them. And you already know me, of course, Miss Genesis Amaris Kemp, the founder and host. But it's more about my guest today. Dr. Bruce Chalmer and Judy Alexander, as I said, a married couple living in Vermont. Dr. Dr. Bruce has been helping individuals, couples, and families in private practice for over 30 years. His practice is now focused on couples. Bruce's other notable interests include musical composition, performance, and choral directing. Bruce is the author of Reigniting the Spark: Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back. Judy recently retired after 23 years as education director at Temple Sinai, a Reform Jewish congregation in South Burlington, Vermont. Previously, she was a classroom teacher and was also an award-winning advertising copywriter. She also a playwright, with several of her plays having been produced at theater festivals. Judy and Bruce have 5 adult children and delightfully increasing collection of grandchildren. Without further ado, please welcome the couple behind it all, where we're going to learn couples therapy in 7 words. Yes, you heard me, 7 words. Welcome, Bruce and Judy.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Genesis. Nice to be here with you.
The pleasure is mine, and I can't wait to dive into these 7 words because I'm like, oh, yes, 7, easy. Well, at least I say it. Let me not make any assumptions because it may be work. So, Bruce and Judy, before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the segment, I want the audience to get to know you a little bit better on the personal front. So I'm going to give you 2 options. We can do a break the ice up front or a rapid 10 fire question. It may be harder with 2 though.
I was going to say that could take a while if we do 10.
Yeah, maybe
questions.
the break the ice up front. Would that sound?
How about a break the ice?
We've seen some of your segments, but I'm not quite sure what we're in for, but we have seen some of your segments.
Amazing.
The rapid fire.
So we're breaking the ice with Bruce and Judy. So I want you each to share something crazy that you have done in your life or a fun and interesting fact about yourself. So I'm going to do ladies first. So Judy, you have the floor.
Okay, well, I guess I probably am the crazier of the 2. So when I was in college, I joined my college skydiving team. So I jumped out of an airplane.
Okay, that is crazy, but I'm a little on that crazy bandwagon too. I haven't jumped out of an airplane, but I have done indoor skydiving, and eventually I'll do the big thing once I can work up my courage. So, now, Bruce, over to you. Do you want to do something crazy, or you want to share something fun and interesting?
Oh my! I'm searching my brain for crazy. You know, I'm really boring. I'm not exactly the wild and crazy type, you know. Certainly.
So you could do fun and interesting.
I could do fun and interesting. Yeah, I mean, I could just talk about writing music, because those are moments when I really go into places that I don't usually go to. And most of my music, it's in the Jewish world. It's in I've written a lot of liturgical stuff. I wrote a cantata that was based on a lot of different Jewish texts and sort of imaginatively interpreted a lot of different things, and that I was going places in myself that I didn't know were there.
And stylistically, it was all different genres of music too.
Yeah, lots of different styles. That's actually kind of how we met indirectly, was that Judy went to a performance of that cantata
before I knew him.
Before she even knew me.
I didn't even know who he was.
And when we first, encountered each other, and she said, oh, she had been there and she loved the music, and that was it. She had me then. So.
Super cool. And I love to hear those stories of how couples have met. So I got a bonus in that one. So let's dive into couples therapy. the 7 words, which I know couples therapy is also the name of your podcast, but how did you guys niche it down to just 7 words?
Well, I can tell, should I tell the origin story?
There you
Yes,
go.
there's an origin story here. So, and we'll show you this. Don't hold up the cup yet.
No, I'm not holding
We
it. I
have it
was
on a
going to
cup.
take a sip, but I
Yeah.
better not.
Better not, or take it from the other side.
Okay.
Yeah, the origin story is when I was early in my practice. So we're talking, I've been in, but the private practice been open 27 years. I was doing internships before that. And early on, I was in a consultation group with some colleagues. And on the way out the door, one of my colleagues, because we've been talking about couples therapy, on the way out the door, one of my colleagues just turned to me and said, "How do you do couples therapy anyway?" Which is sort of a ridiculous question to ask, on the way out the door. But I stopped and thought about it, and I said, well, I hadn't thought about it, but if I really boil it all down, I suppose what I'm telling people is be kind and don't panic. Now that's 5 words if you count and, so that's only 5. Be kind and don't panic. And what I mean by be kind, it's not just be nice. Of course, we should all be nice to each other, but be kind in the sense of be kin. Recognize your kinship with someone, especially if you're an intimate couple with each other. Recognize that you're on the same team. Even if you're annoyed, you're on the same team. That sense of being kind in that sense. Well, you can't do that if you're in a panic. When people are in a panic, it's just all about fight, flight, freeze, survival. And so the don't panic part, when I stopped and thought about all the training I'd had with working with folks, a lot of it, if you really look at it, it's about saying, how can you not panic? So there was my 5-word formula: be kind and don't panic. And then, of course, the question then arises, do you know the question?
How do you not panic?
How do you not panic? Exactly. It's like easy for me to say, don't panic, right? The answer to panic, it seems to me, is 2 more words: have faith. So the 7 words are be kind, don't panic, and have faith. We have that on we have props. We have merch to
We
say
have
that.
merch.
Oh, nice. I like that.
Yes, be kind, don't panic, and have faith. There's our
There's our
podcast
logo.
logo. And then there's the
7-word
inspiring words.
formula.
So when I talk about faith, I don't necessarily mean any particular religious faith. I mean faith in a much more general sense. The way I define faith is when you accept that reality is right to be what it is. So for people who are religious, that's like saying, oh, you mean God is good. But for people who aren't religious, they can still relate to that. It's like an orientation to the world that says, even when things are difficult, even when your partner is annoying the living heck out of you, even when, and I don't mean to be trivializing it either, even when it's really painful, some really hard stuff is happening, you can still say, yeah, but the world is founded on, it's basically right to be what it is. We have to work with it rather than fight with it. And so that's what lets you not panic and work with it, and therefore be kind. So there's my origin story of the 7 words.
I like the origin story of the 7 words. And now that you explained it, it is very simple because we all exuberate kindness. And I tell people, if you're kinder to the people at work than you are to the people in your home, there's obviously a disconnect there because you see those people for 8 hours a day, but you live with the people inside of your home. And then whenever you talked about the don't panic, when you think about whenever we're panicked, our emotions are heightened. And sometimes we have those faux pas and those word vomits. And once you release words out of your mouth, you can't take those words back. And how that other individual is going to feel and perceive what you just said can be very hurtful. So it's like metaphorically you're cutting them, and that cut could be a small incision, or it could be a deep laceration. And how do you repair from that? And then to have faith, I come from a religious and spiritual background. And I always like to say, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountain. And anyone who knows how small a mustard seed is, that's very tiny. But imagine something so small as a mustard seed moving a mountain. So imagine what happens when you increase your faith. And you have to remember like why you fell in love with that individual. It's not always going to be rosies and pocket full of dozies or whatnot. But you have to remember, okay, when I stood at that aisle and in front of wherever you got married, and I profess my love for this man or this woman, this is how I felt in that moment. And think about that and continue to date. Like, because sometimes I tell my husband, like, hey, dude, you haven't taken me on a date in a while. I would love to go to the movies or just, even do something here at the house, but just spending that intimate time with each other. And it doesn't have to be something lavish. It could be something just small and simple, but you're spending time with one another.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you were talking about words can lacerate. In fact, I think the last podcast that we did, one of our listener questions was, somebody, she wrote in, her husband had said something really mean and cruel. And she said, is that what he really thinks about me? And like you said, words can have that power to wound so deeply. It's hard. It's hard when your partner comes out with something and you're thinking, wow, is that what he really thinks? Does he really think that I'm what was it, a controlling person or whatever it was?
Yeah. And of course, what we were talking about was that is what he really thinks when he said it, but he also thinks other things are the opposite of that. In other words, we're always thinking, we've got a lot of different things going on in our heads at various times. But those, the effect, I just was talking with a couple the other day where the woman was talking about the effect of something her father had said to her when she was 10. And this is a woman in her 40s. And she's still hurt by this offhand comment her father said to her when she was 10. And somebody once said the half-life of a negative comment is 50 years. It's like it can really last. So that silly thing that often people would say when I was a kid, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me.
Yeah.
Baloney. Words can hurt really badly.
Yes,
we need to be careful.
They can wound deeply.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this question is going to be for Judy. So Judy, based on the extent of y'all's marriage and how long you've been married, what is one challenge that you all face early on, and how has it helped you personally and as a couple develop and grow a fonder love for one another?
Great question.
That is a great question. Boy, that's tough because we connected so deeply when we first met. I mean, after our first encounter, our date, it was like through like JDate, and it's like, and I said, let's just meet and have coffee, because I just wanted to get it over with, because I had been divorced at that point, I think 5 years or something like that.
And I'd been separated for about 10 minutes. So,
and
against all of my advice, by the way, just saying.
I had been through the routine, through lunches and dinners and drinks. And it's like, the part was like, please don't order dessert. Please don't order dessert, that type of thing. So when I met Bruce and I said, let's just meet for coffee. And it was like a 2.5-hour coffee. And we clicked. And I said to my girlfriends that night at my mahjong game, I play mahjong, I said, I finally met somebody I think I can have a really deep relationship with. And I think after our second or third date, I knew I was going to marry him. So I think my biggest things were any obstacles to overcome, just some baggage that I had from my first marriage that, you don't want to repeat. You don't want to make a mistake the second time around. And he's nothing like my first husband. But I just wanted to make sure that, he was okay with things that I had in my past that we all have things in our past that we're not too proud of. But he was so accepting and non-judgmental about everything that it immediately put me at ease. And I just knew he was the guy that just solidified for me. I can make my life with this man. And it's just been getting better and better every day. So.
We're coming up on our 18th anniversary.
Wow. And congratulations. And I'm going to highlight baggage, because I think that's an important part, because people fail to realize baggage in relationships. Like, the past relationship is just that, it's the past. But until you take that baggage out and you heal from it, and I'm going to also interject an analogy here. When we travel and we're getting ready to go on that amazing vacation, before we even get to our gates, they make us go through baggage where we're getting ticketing and baggage, and they ask you to put your luggage on the scale to weigh it. Why do they do that? Because they know the aircraft is carrying a certain amount of passengers, and then the cargo is supposed to be at a certain amount of weight in order for the plane to reach its highest altitude and get there safely to your final destination. So if your baggage is overweight, they're going to ask you to either take out some of the articles from your baggage or to pay for another baggage, just so they're looking out for the safety of everyone else, not just you. So just like that analogy, sometimes we have to take out some of the unwanted baggage that is hindering us and holding us down in order for us to really be free and see the goodness in somebody else, because you don't want that person to bring baggage into the relationship, because then baggage plus baggage is a whole lot of baggage, and we're not going to be able to go anywhere because we'll be there for a long time taking out those unwanted items. So what do you have in your life that's no longer serving you? It's not adding value, and you're not adding value to it. So discard that, because when you come into a new relationship, it's new for a reason. So you need to come in with an open mind and wipe the slate clean. And being with my husband has taught me that. We dated for 3 years. I tell people we did it wrong. We dated for 3 years, lived together for 1.5. And I said, I test drove the car for a long time before I bought it. And I had to realize that coming out of a relationship of narcissistic abuse and just different stuff, like in the beginning, I was putting some of those tendencies onto my husband, not realizing that he's his own person. And I think that can easily sour a relationship, because then you're not giving that person a fair chance, and vice versa. My husband had been married before, did not work out, and then he's getting with me, and I'm very, direct, and I could be very bossy at times because I come from oil and gas, so worked in a male dominated field for 12 years. So I like what I like, and I want what I want when I want it, and I don't have time for the nonsense. So I think that's important to just keep that in mind. So I'm gonna do this question for you, Bruce. From a male perspective, whenever you met Judy, was there any form of baggage, whether it was mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, that you needed to let go so you could really embrace the woman that Judy is?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mentioned when we were talking about how we met, and I had been, separated for not literally 10 minutes, but very short time. And it seemed that way. Yeah. It was literally about 3 weeks that my ex had moved out. I'm not going to get into the details of it, except I don't think I need to say anything specifically. My ex is a fine person, but whatever. It was really clear we were not going to get back together. Let's just put it that way, based on who she figured out she was. And so based on that, I knew, the reason why it's a bad idea, rebound relationships get a bad rap for a good reason. Because it's exactly, I think, Genesis, what you were saying, that you still have too much baggage from the previous one. And so, for me to actually take in this actual person sitting next to me, as I was getting to know her, I had to be done with the previous relationship enough. And I know the first day we met, we talked about this, the first day we met, and had that coffee, and and at the end of it saying, do you want to meet again? And we were both thinking, yeah. And I wasn't ready to be smitten yet. That didn't take very long, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I just knew it was uncanny how well suited we are to each other. And so that was an amazing experience, because, I was still grieving the loss of, it was a 30-year marriage. My first one, I got married very young. I got married when I was 20. So that I was still feeling, it was clear it was over, but I was still feeling that was painfully gone. And I went home and I just cried out of some combination of grief and release, and also relief that, oh, there is someone out there that I can really connect with. So I had to get through that in order to open my heart to fall in love again. It didn't take very long, I have to say, but that's what I had to do. And I recognize that. And, it's funny, I think I said, against all advice I've ever given to anybody about, if you just got separated, for crying out loud, don't be dating yet. And nevertheless, I just took a peek at, J-Date. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a Jewish, and this was like 19 years ago now. We're talking
Mhm.
almost 20 years ago. But it's like match for Jewish people. And so and Vermont is a very small Jewish community. And so I just wanted to see, is there anybody on there that I don't already know and realize is probably not right for me? I was living in an even smaller town than Burlington. Burlington, in most of the country would call Burlington a small town. Montpelier is the capital of Vermont, where I was living. It is the smallest state capital in the country. Population is about 8,500. And so the Jewish community there is tiny. I knew everybody. I mean, with all due respect to all the available women there, none of them were right for me. And so I said, well, I'll check out the big city, Burlington. And so, I went ahead and did that, but I wasn't thinking I would date yet. I was just thinking, I just want to look and see. And then there was this amazing profile that Judy had put up where she said, I'll tell you what she said. She said, an Eshet Chayil, but a woman of today. Now, what's an Eshet Chayil? If you don't know Hebrew, you wouldn't know what that is. Well, an Eshet Chayil, it's a quote from Proverbs, the section on a woman of valor. That's what Eshet Chayil means. A woman of valor who can find her prices far above rubies. So she worded that directed toward the only man in Vermont who would be perfect for her, because
that's where my advertising copywriting background came in.
Yeah, because I knew what an Eshet Chayil was, so I qualified as, Jewish guy who knows something, because Judy knows a lot. She's got that's check. And she said a woman of today, because if she had just said an Eshet Chayil, I would think the Yiddish expression would be too frum. In other words, too religiously observant for me, because I am somewhat, but not that much. I'm not like Orthodox in my practice. It was at one time, but not so much anymore. So it was perfect. It's like, I'm the guy. And so anyway, that's a long answer to your question.
I wrote it to get him.
Yeah, she didn't know it, but she wrote it to get me, and it worked.
That's amazing. And now here's another question for both of you. So think about couples therapy as a whole and pair it with the seven words that you all stand on, and think about love languages. How can partners understand each other's love language so they know what their partner wants and what their partner needs, so they can effectively communicate and bridge the gap?
Yeah.
I'll let you take that
I'll
one.
take that. Yeah, okay, sure.
I'll
Yeah,
put it to the therapist.
Yeah, I think the way that maps onto the 7 words actually is pretty direct, because it's funny. There's the golden rule, and then there's the platinum rule. This somebody we interviewed actually mentioned that term to it. The golden rule, of course, we all know, right? Do unto others as they would do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That turns out to be a bad idea. That's contrary to the notion of love languages, because I should do unto you according to your love languages, not mine. So the platinum rule is no, do unto others as they would have you do unto them. It's like, so the things that may be my love languages may not be yours, and I should attend to yours. Now, the way that maps onto the 7 words is, if I'm in a panic, I can't possibly tell what that is. If I'm feeling like, oh no, all the stuff I think should work isn't working with her, and I'm panicking about it, I'm utterly missing the fact that if I can calm down and say, no, wait a minute, she's got different buttons to press that'll work for her. Sometimes it's a silly analogy, but I sometimes say, when you marry someone, you do need to get a copy of their user's guide. I think there's a gender piece to this, especially true for men. We can't seem to find the user's guide for women.
It's because men don't use the user's guide. They just think, I'll
we
do
just
it.
wing
We
it,
know how
right.
to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Turns out they don't.
It turns out we don't, and we do
always.
know how to read the user's guide. And if you're in a panic, you can't do that. So have faith so you cannot be in a panic, so you can actually attend to what this person who is your kin really wants in terms of their love language. So that's a way of kind of resolving those two, I think.
So Judy, do you want to add anything on to that regarding love
I
languages?
just want to append to that is that always keep in mind that your partner, and hopefully you feel this way, and that's why I'm like, go back to my first marriage. That's why things didn't work out, I think, is that I know that whatever I do or say, whether or not Bruce agrees or disagrees with me, I know he always has my best interests at heart. So, I feel it with everything he says and does to me and for me. So I'm not inhibited about saying anything or doing anything with him, because I know that he he's always thinking of me and putting me first.
Well, and can I add to that? I mean, I think a critical part of that, especially for men to know, even more than women, is when you're saying that, I'm touched to hear that. I'm glad you feel that way. I want you to feel that way. One of the reasons I think you can feel that way is that I can be an arrogant person. I'm capable of that, but I'm not so arrogant as to think that I know better than you what's in your best interest. So in knowing, in wanting your best interest, I have to be listening to you, what you really want, as opposed to what I think you're supposed to want.
No, yeah. And that's what I'm saying, you know, it's the non-judgmental part of you. But even if, and you're hardly ever critical of anything, you have such a nice way of saying it, and of saying things to me that I know that he's putting me first. He always puts me first.
Yeah, that's
and even little things like we go out walking together every day, and he'll make an effort to walk on the outside so that, you know, if the car's going to go off the road, it's going to hit him first. I mean, you know, it's like a teeny tiny thing, but I know, you know, no matter where we're walking, he'll always put himself in harm's way before he will let me get there. So those little things, you know.
And thank you for sharing that. And the way that you all just communicated there, for those watching the video, you could see how they both stopped and paused, and actively listening is the key to make sure that you heard what the other person said, you processed it, and then you are speaking versus interrupting and interjecting where that person feels like they're not heard and it shuts them down. And then the last question before we jump into the call to action is, you all focus on the needs for stability and intimacy and how they require different skills, because being like, for men, because men are like waffles, they like to compartmentalize. Women are like noodles, they're very flexible and they can interweave themselves. And that's not a Genesis quote. I heard that from like a marriage seminar. And
I got to quote you on that. But thank you for giving credit where it's due, but I got to quote you on that one.
And so one thing is sometimes men feel like, oh, I'm providing for you. I'm making sure, you know, the house is taken care of. I pay the bills and all of this stuff. And they think that's stability, but maybe your partner wants another form of stability. But if you don't ask, then you just think what you're doing is providing that stability. And then whenever you think about intimacy, there's various forms of intimacy. It's not just the sexual intimacy. They may want intellectual intimacy. They may want physical intimacy, just giving them a hug, a kiss, just showing that gratitude, that appreciation, or etc. And I feel like sometimes in this day and age, you know, sex, money, drugs, and violence sells on TV, and television is telling you a vision, and people just see intimacy as one-sided, but it is multifaceted. So can you all interject here before we jump into the call to action?
Yeah, sure. Can I go with that? Yeah. I mean, intimacy, when I talk about them both as needs, that, you know, if we lack stability is pretty, I think most people think of it more or less the same way. Stability means you're not really worried about the relationship. If it feels stable, you know, you wake up in the morning and you're not thinking, oh, what's going to happen to my relationship today? Stability is important. It's every bit as important as intimacy. But what a lot of couples will do, because stability gets to be like super important, you do things like you marry someone, you have kids, you know, keep upping the ante, so to speak. Stability becomes very important. You can start to panic if it feels like, oh no, that's threatened. So people will avoid rocking the boat sometimes. And intimacy, of course, is about things like physical, sexual, spiritual, intellectual intimacy. Those are all important. Sometimes intimacy involves telling your partner something you're pretty sure they're not going to enjoy hearing. You know, I wish you would do X, Y, or Z, or I wish you wouldn't do X, Y, or Z. Or I've had a dream that I want to do something that we're not doing, and I'm not sure if you're going to be okay with that, you know? To raise anxiety, and that's what I preach about. It does sound like preaching, doesn't it? I preach about the chief skill of intimacy is to tolerate anxiety as opposed to avoiding it. You have to be able to raise anxiety, not because you're being a jerk, but because you need to, you know, if I need to say something to you, you need to say something to me, and you're worried about, you know, how we might react. That is a really important intimacy skill. And my favorite metaphor for stability and intimacy, it's like a plant. Stability is the roots that hold it in place, so it doesn't just blow over in the breezes. but intimacy is the energy for growth. And, you talked earlier, Genesis, about a mustard seed moving mountains. Another analogy is, think about if they're paving over a sidewalk and there's a seed under there, and that seed is germinated, it's going to try and crack the sidewalk or die trying. We do not tolerate if our intimacy is cut off. And so one way or another, somebody's going to crack the sidewalk. And sometimes that comes out as an affair, or as somebody just all of a sudden, abruptly departing the relationship without any warning, or fighting about everything and anything except what's really bothering them. There's all kinds of sort of symptoms of lack of intimacy, but that's a lot of what I deal with folks.
Because they don't want to rock the boat.
Because they don't want to rock the boat, which is understandable.
You just keep holding it in until it explodes.
Yeah.
And Judy, would you like to add anything there before we jump into the call to action, as it's coming close to the time commitment?
Well, I think I just did. So
Okay, awesome.
that was my 2 cents. I think we can go on to the call to action.
Yeah.
So Bruce and Judy, or Judy and Bruce, what is your call to action for this segment? What do you want the listeners to gravitate to?
Oh, gee. Well, I mean, what do you think?
Well, there's our 7-word formula.
That's just what popped in my mind. Be kind, don't panic, and have faith as one way of
Well, I think,
Yeah.
just building on what we just talked about, the stability and intimacy, and how important both are for a relationship, because you can't really be intimate unless you feel stable with your partner. And, conversely, you can't really feel stable if you don't have the intimacy. And, both are so critical to have a strong, caring, loving, and growing relationship. If our relationship was just stable and we weren't growing, I don't think we would be as happy as we are now. I think we're probably happier, if that's possible, and more in love today than we were, 18 years ago when we got married. It's just gotten better because I think both of us have been able to maintain that level of both stability and intimacy.
Amazing. And
Couldn't say
now,
it better.
Bruce, I want you to hold up that book.
Yes, that's
And
what I was just thinking.
so, Reigniting the Spark, y'all, and your book is available on Amazon, right?
On Amazon and anywhere books are sold. And also what's proven quite popular is the audio version, which I did the narration for. So if you want to hear my dulcet tones narrating the book, you can get the audio version from the Amazon site as well.
And also Kindle. Yeah.
And also there's a Kindle version as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'll have that in the show notes. And Bruce and Judy, tell the audience how they could connect with you, plug your website, and where you primarily hang out on social media.
So
okay, our website is CT, like couples therapy, CTin7 and the number 7.com. And you can write to each of us, like Bruce at CTin7.com or Judy at CTin7.com. Social media, I think we're mostly on Facebook and some Instagram these days, not too much.
We made all of one
we're not
TikTok
big
video.
yeah.
But yeah, on
We're not
Facebook.
huge social media people.
Yeah, the Facebook page is Couples Therapy in 7 words.
I think you have a
It's written
Pinterest
out.
account, but that's kind of
Yeah, not
languishing.
using that a lot. No, if the social media place, especially where, I don't want to say you're an old fogey, but I am. For those of us who are old fogies, is Facebook, right? More than where actually you young folks hang out. But it's Couples Therapy in 7 words is the name of our Facebook page. We post, like our podcasts, we announce them on there, and occasionally put other postings up there as well.
Amazing. So there you have it, audience. We just had Bruce Chalmer and Judy Alexander. All of their contact information will be in the show notes. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We're on 40+ platforms. And to see the video to this recording, head on over to Gems with Genesis Amaris Kemp on YouTube, and you'll find all things video content. And until next time, peace, love, and lots of blessings. Have yourself an amazing day, and I challenge you to be kind and don't panic, plus have faith. From Bruce and Judy.